and this is the second hour of the Adam Messer Show. We have Jim Reed in the house today.
Howdy.
Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm fine. I'm glad to, I'm appreciative of the invitation. I'm glad to be here. I hope that anybody who's listening is having a good time.
I'm glad we actually got to meet in person finally, because I guess on paper I've known you for a couple of years, but I never met you in person.
Right.
And then I see your stuff all the time, which is pretty cool. I love your Psychotronic Society, the film, especially the little Facebook group you post about different stuff that you're going to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I mean, if people want to find out more about the Psychotronic Film Society of Savannah, we have a group on Facebook, and that's a good way. We're on Instagram as well. Mm-hmm. So if people want to follow us on Instagram, it's a hashtag PFS for Psychotronic Film Society. It's PFSSAV, and our good friend Phil Price handles the Twitter and the Instagram at PFSSAV, and then I run the Facebook group. It's a private group in the sense that it's not a page, but you just look it up and it'll say, oh, it's a group, and it says private group, but all you have to do is say, I'd like to join, and then you join. But having it as a private group, we did it that way because of
I like the private groups a lot better than the public ones.
Really, I don't know that much about it, but I just know that Facebook's the way they've got it set up, if we did it as a page, it would actually be more difficult for
people to see it,
for people to see the events and things. But with a private group, in theory, it makes it easier for the folks who might really want to come see the movies, and they can interact, and we can, whatever. So
yeah, the thing I like about the groups versus the page, because I have a page for my show, and then I don't have a group for the show, but I noticed that when Facebook changed over to more of a pay-to-play strategy, and I get it, they're in business to make money. I get that, but
I'm kind of worried about them. I hope they're able to make it.
I know, right?
I mean?
They're struggling.
Those
they're
little
struggling right now.
A penny here, a penny there. It's like it would be a real shame if that place went out of business. Right?
I'm telling you, but I noticed, I have maybe 700 people that like my page, and then if I post something, it'll say, 15 people saw it, or 10 people saw it, or 20 people. But in a group, though, when I make a post,
a significantly larger number of people.
Yeah, and it seems like you have a better interaction with folks there. That's
what it seems like to me, and that's why we did it that way. I used to have a page for the Psychotronic Film Society, and I deactivated it a few years ago, which, it made it really difficult for the society, to be honest with you, because what I did was I just got off of Facebook entirely. There was so much negativity and nastiness. And I thought, well, I just kind of can't be a part of this. And so I just turned all the Facebook stuff off for a couple of years. And then I sort of reluctantly turned it back on, because the truth is it was making it really difficult. So many people are plugged into Facebook that if they don't hear about it on Facebook, or if it isn't on Facebook, it's almost like it's not happening in their world. So
we were talking about that. Facebook has almost kind of replaced the web for a lot of folks.
I think so. So I that's why I started the group up again, and I dabble occasionally. I'll pop up and make a post or something on Facebook. Not nearly as much as I used to, but
I try to use it. I try to use it mostly for sharing stuff about events and things like that I'm doing, and
I try to use it to win friends and influence people.
Yeah. Napoleon Hill.
That's not true.
That's a good one. Yeah, but I don't know. I think it's, as much as social media has pushed people towards their phones and computers and things like that, I enjoy face-to-face interactions. I enjoy like the meetups and stuff like that, when you actually can get a group of people together that, hey, we like, we're interested in the same kind of thing, and you can kind of geek out about the same kind of things.
Well, that's, to a certain extent, that's the reason I do the Film Society.
Well, that was one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on the show, because I like different, I'm not going to say I'm a film connoisseur, but I like different films, and I like stuff that's kind of like out there, sometimes when I come across it, or, I'm not going to say that I'm the gold miner and I find all these like little gems.
Sure.
But I like, that's one of the things I like about that, is that you have been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, that's
and,
true. I think we're the longest. I think the Psychotronic Film Society is the longest running, existing community film society in town. And I think, and it's what's a good way of putting this? I do the Film Society thing for the same reason that I also have another thing called Knocked Out Loaded, and I don't know if we talked about that, but I have a little thing called Knocked Out Loaded, and that's just a moniker that I use when I'm every once in a while, like 2 or 3 times a year, I'll independently promote a live concert event, right?
Oh, I think you just said something like briefly. You didn't. I don't even know if you mentioned the name, but
yeah, it's called
because you're a musician,
right? It's called Knocked Out Loaded, and it's the sort of the follow up or the what's the word I'm looking for? It was the sort of logical progression, I guess, of an organization that I used to be involved in for a few years that was called the Tiny Team. It was called Tiny Team Concerts, and we called it that because there were about 4 of us who were like the tiny team.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was that we were trying to, all of us loved seeing concerts and live music and whatnot, but we were all quite frustrated or flummoxed that a lot of the artists that we were most interested in oftentimes would just never play Savannah. They wouldn't come here. And there were a bunch of very logical and good reasons, some good reasons, some bad reasons why they didn't play here.
Mm-hmm.
But we sort of pooled our resources and our individual knowledge or our enthusiasm, and we had this little collective, and what we would do is we would find artists that we thought were real important who had either never played Savannah or maybe hadn't played here in decades, and we would bring them in for shows. But we didn't own our own venue. We didn't own our own nightclub or theater.
Yeah.
So we would have to rent some place and basically haul in a big professional PA and move everything out of the way and put on a show like an old-fashioned thing, like put up a curtain, put on a show, and then when the show's over, like tear everything down.
Yeah.
And in doing that, it was really fun in a sense, but it was a ton of work, and we didn't make any money, and there was never we knew going into it we would not make any money. The whole idea was just to do it for the sake of doing it and to improve and diversify the cultural quality of life in town. But eventually, we did that for a few years and had good success with it. In that some people, it made a lot of people really happy, and we brought some really great shows to town. But in the end, it was not sustainable financially.
Yeah.
And so
it's hard if you don't have a venue, and it's hard if you don't have like a partnership where, either low cost or no cost type stuff, and especially trying to bring in somebody, because excuse me, I know some artists. Hey, Bill. I know some people that that they'll travel, and they'll play. Like I know this guy from Alaska. His name Russell, and he does tours or whatever. And he sent me a message and said, "Hey, can you get me in touch with a few places in town?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll just give you, like I gave him a list of different places or whatever." But it's difficult if you're trying to bring people in, that may be like a bigger name or maybe not a bigger name. It doesn't matter. But if you don't have a venue or if you don't have your own spot and you're trying to do an event, I know it's hard.
That's a big part of it, and the other part of it is that what we were doing with the Tiny Team, and what I continue to do now on my own in the Knocked Out Loaded, is it's kind of like the Psychotronic Film Society in that.
But for music,
sort of, yes, yeah, for live performance. In that, in other words, when I bring films to town through the PFS, right, and it's so there's a common through line, okay, for all the stuff that I do, and it's not intentional, but it's just the way it worked out. So the Psychotronic Film Society, by and large, shows movies that the majority of people, for whatever reason, aren't particularly interested in seeing. Okay, in other words, I'm not interested in spending a lot of energy to bring in movies that everybody wants to see, because if everybody already wants to see it, it probably doesn't need to be brought in. In other words, everybody's already seeing it, right? So the whole idea is to provide an alternative to what you can't normally get.
Right.
And then with Tiny Team, to a certain extent, that was the same thing. We want to only bring in artists that nobody else is bringing to town, or who would never think of playing here on their own. Well, that begs the question. Why wouldn't they think of playing here, and why would nobody else bring them into town? Okay, now, and the answer to that, generally speaking, by and large, would be either A, the people in town who are in the business of bringing in live concerts either A, don't know about these artists, or B, don't care for them, okay, or C, know about them and care for them, but they don't think it's a wise financial risk. In other words, they're pretty sure it'll flop,
They're
okay?
looking at the revenue.
But what we were doing was we were saying, well, we'll do it anyway, as often as we can, right?
Yeah.
So when you do that, let's say you're bringing somebody into town who maybe is incredibly acclaimed in the world of music, but they don't get played on the radio here. Very few people in town know them, right?
Yeah.
So then what you're doing is you not only have the financial expenses and the risk of trying to make the whole thing happen, but now you've actually got to go out ahead of time as best you can on a shoestring budget. And you have to convince people to give it a try.
Yeah.
Convince people to buy a ticket to see something, to see an artist they've never really heard of before. And that's very difficult to do. And you know,
there was a lady named Becky Denton
Mm-hmm.
that I interviewed, and she's an artist that does. It's kind of like country, but it's also kind of like beach music.
Okay.
And I interviewed her, and the same kind of thing. You know, she's well known in her arena,
Right.
you know, but she's not, you know, well known in Savannah or whatever. And she came to Tybee for a show, and I talked to her for about 10 minutes on the radio, and it was kind of like last minute. It wasn't planned or anything like that, but I just happened to talk with her because I was writing an article about the event,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, "Well, you should talk to this lady." And then I was like, "You know what? This is crazy. Why aren't people talking about her?
Mm-hmm.
You know, here in Savannah?" And I think that happens a lot. I think that, you know, we'll have people that'll come into town and nobody will know that they're here until like afterwards, or they're like, "Oh, I wish I had known." You know, I hear that a lot.
Well, yeah, you hear that a lot in town. I mean, that's the main reason I did the film scene column. That I kind of came up with it and pitched it to do Savannah, and they took the chance on it, and it went well. And then ultimately now it's I've kind of come full circle in that now I'm back with Connect where I was for many years.
Yeah.
But the whole idea with that is just what you said. So if you have most of the unusual film screenings you have in town, it's the same way with concerts. Okay, so they're similar. Most of them only happen for one day only.
Yeah.
Or sometimes one show only. Not even like we're going to have it 3 shows in one day. So
I would say that majority of stuff in Savannah is like that.
Yeah. So if you don't find out about it in time enough to consider going and maybe make plans to go, okay? Mm-hmm. The majority of people, I would hear that all the time. Before I started doing the column, people would say, "Oh, I see where you showed such and such a movie," or they'd say, "Hey, when are you showing that movie?" And I'd say, "Well, that was 2 weeks ago." "Oh, I missed it."
Yeah.
And so the idea with the film scene column is like every week, if you pick it up and read it, it's pretty much going to give you a bird's eye view. Well, yeah, and then you can go, "Oh, for the next 10 days, like." Because if you don't know, you can't go, right? And
I love that.
Well,
if you don't know, you can't go.
I didn't realize. I wasn't trying to make that pithy, but
that
okay.
was good. That's a good catchphrase, though.
Well,
if you don't know, you can't go.
It's true. If the gloves don't fit, you know.
Let me do a station ID.
That's my
quick.
Nipsey Russell tribute.
You're listening to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul, and so we're talking about, you know, trying to make the public more aware of venues and people that are coming into town for the film, promoting the films or whatever, and then also
here's the thing,
Knocked Out Loaded.
Yeah, Knocked Out Loaded, and so like with Knocked Out Loaded, it's the same thing as the Tiny Team basically, except it's the tiniest team because it's just
a one-man show.
It's me.
Yeah,
it's me and whatever nice friends of mine, kind friends of mine, I can get to kind of pitch in on the day of the show, and I can either pay him a little bit of money or take him to dinner or buy him some drinks or
pizza
something.
And beer type thing.
Who also believe in it and realize that I'm not.
You're not making a lot of money off of it.
I'm not making any. No, I'm not making any money. Like I wish.
You're doing it for the love of the art.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of my big. I'm sure it's a problem. One of my big problems is I tend to often live my life as though I'm a philanthropist
without the money.
Right. Like in other words, like I sort of get involved in these like escapades where I'm sort of like constructing situations that are designed to like make other people happy, but then there's there's no possible way. It's very foolish, right? But it's a calling, I guess. So so Knocked Out Loaded is similar to Tiny Team, except it's very small. But we're occasionally bring acts to town, and these are people that would like never play here. So for example, like I think the most recent show we did was a handful of months ago, and I brought this band to town called the Monks of Doom, and the Monks of Doom are probably, I mean, they're right up there in like my top 5 all-time favorite bands ever. I mean, they're of a tremendous importance to me in terms of.
Look them up because I've never heard of them.
Yeah, they're a wonderful band, and they rarely play shows. And one of the main reasons for that is that one of the guys in the band, 2 or 3 of the guys in the band are in another band that's much more well known, and they occasionally plays, right? Mm-hmm. And then the one guy in the band is in a huge band that plays like major. You know, he's a member of a band. He's not the famous member, but he's a member of this famous band that goes around and makes really good money, and he's booked up like years in advance. It's difficult for him to go do stuff. And then the drummer lives in Australia. Mm-hmm. And he's got an IT job. So the only time the Monks of Doom can ever play in America, number one, the drummer has to come over from all the way from Australia, and he's got to do it on the like week or 2 of vacation he has from his IT job. It's crazy,
Wow.
right? And then but all the stars have to align. In other words, his vacation has to line up with the guy in the famous band, which is a band called Counting Crows. Like, it has to line up with Counting Crows, like taking a break or not being on tour, not making a record or something. But when all the stars align, then the Monks of Doom can do a handful of shows. And I've been trying to book them for, like, I don't know, man, since 2002 or something, like trying to make it happen. And then it finally happened, and we were able to get them to kick off their little rare tour here in town. And the show was great, and they played amazingly, and it was really wonderful. Now, did it make any money? No.
Right.
Should there have been more people there? Absolutely.
Right.
But I mean, there were some people. There were quite literally people who came down to see the show from St. Louis. I mean, they literally trapped. These are people who had a connection to Savannah,
right,
and they had friends they could stay with, and they came all the way down, like, just to be there to see the show in a little club.
Wow.
So it's one of those things where, was it worth the effort? Sure. Did it make people happy? Absolutely. Did it thrill me to be able to say, hey, Savannah, check out these guys, look at this? Yes. And the people who were there and saw it, by and large, I think it really blew their minds, and they loved it, and maybe they found a new favorite band. But did it cost me money? Yeah, sure. So I'll continue to do stuff like that as long as I can.
I can understand that, because I do this little book convention called the Savannah Quill, and the first 2 years I lost money. And but it was a labor of love. It was something I wanted to do. And then this last year,
you better watch your back, man, because the real Savannah Book Festival's coming for you. You better listen. You better watch your back, because those are tough hombres.
They've always been nice to me.
Yeah, well, to your face.
Yeah.
Listen, if you had any
this last
idea.
year, I was like, I've got to do something where I'm not losing money, and make it more, a little bit smaller venue and that kind of thing. And we went to Savannah Coffee Roasters, and we did, and I changed the name to Savannah Authors Expo.
Okay.
So it was a one-day thing. But that's one of the biggest things, I think, with events in Savannah. It's a hit or miss. And a lot of times it's going to be your friends that are like, oh, yeah, I support what you're doing, or I'm trying to help you with what you're doing. But this little community of writers and authors that we have, we're starting to build up a little group of people that are like, hey, I really love this. I want to be part of this.
Well, just be careful, because if they find your body in a ditch and you're covered with binding paste, we're going to know. We're going to know that it was those. I'm looking at the list on the wall. I'm looking at the list of the words.
Can't say any of
the
those
words
words.
I can't say, but can I? But
don't even try it, Jeff.
Well, no. I'm not going to say any of these words.
Don't say any of the words.
I'm not going to say any of these words, but I'm just going to say those rat bastards from the Savannah.
No.
That's not on the
No,
list.
they're great
That's
people.
Not on
They're
the
great
list.
people.
I'm just kind of kidding. I'm kidding.
I'm like at a loss.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
That's the thing about it.
I have no reason to suspect that anybody involved with the Savannah Book Festival is anything other than a sweetheart.
I tell you what, it's so crazy.
Or
but
do I?
The lady that at Savannah Coffee Roasters is on the board. And so we were talking, and I said, I've been doing this little event. She said they'd never even heard of it. And I was like, yeah, I probably, wouldn't expect you all to, really hear about it, because we do indie authors, and, they do like name.
No, you're not on their radar.
Yeah.
I have people sometimes, I'll meet people, okay, here in Savannah, and they'll say, oh, what do you do? And at some point I'll say, well, I do this film series thing. And they go, oh, so now what is that again? And I say, well, like every Wednesday.
Like if you didn't know, you wouldn't know.
Well, I say like every Wednesday night, I put on, we black out the Sentient Being Coffee Shop. We make it a little screening room. It's intimate. Everybody's real quiet. And we show these amazing, unusual films from all around the world. And they go every Wednesday night? I said, yeah. And then they say, how long have you been doing that?
You're like, for 15 years?
Yeah, and I say like 16 years or whatever. And they go, what, huh? And they'll say, because this usually happens right after they finish saying to me, something like, movies are my life. I love weird movies. I can't get enough of weird movies. I go, oh, well, come on. And they say, how you've been doing it? 16 years. And then they say, well, how come I have never heard of it? To which I say, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you read Connect Savannah? And they go, no. And I say, well, do you read Do Savannah? And they go, no. Yeah. Well, are you on Facebook? Not really. And then at a certain point, it's like, well, see, and this is the point I wanted to make earlier. At a certain point, it's not enough. It's not enough that people like me, and there are 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 handfuls of people just like me in town,
right,
who really go to extreme lengths of energy and time and money and effort to try to make this city more interesting, stranger, more diverse. Okay,
contribute,
but it's not enough.
Yeah,
the people who live here have to take some responsibility for informing themselves. They have to be sponges. They have to soak up the information. I mean, none of us can, could get a cell phone number of everybody in town and call them and say, hey, by the way. So it's always interesting to me that a lot of times I find, and I don't mean to sound frustrated because I'm more bewildered by it, but you'll find these people in town who will talk your ear off just like I do, right? But they'll talk your ear off about how they're gung-ho about supporting this or supporting that. But then when you really start to talk about it, you find out that they have absolutely no idea that something just exactly fitting the description of the thing they swear
would actually love to do.
It's already taking place. And by the way, not only is it already taking place, it's hurting. It's like it's losing money. And sometimes all it takes, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
These concert events I put on, okay? These film screenings I have, sometimes 5 or 6 tickets is all that it would take for me to just break even. Yeah. Like literally, it's like, if we just sold 5 more tickets, we didn't lose money. And then, okay, so where are these people? Where are they?
Right.
And I think a lot of times, quite honestly, they're sitting at home. They're playing. I don't know what is it called.
They're vegging out on the.
They're playing a video game.
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And or sometimes they're not there because they're too busy on social media complaining that nothing cool ever happens in Savannah.
I have, honestly,
they're very busy
the last
doing
couple
that.
of years, 2016 is when I started, doing these events, and I faced the same kind of challenges. This last year, I started doing this thing called WordBeat Poetry. So I got into writing poetry and hadn't written poetry since I was in high school, and I partnered with eShavers to host an event. So I have an event, actually, I'm not trying to plug it right now, but I have an event next Friday.
Okay.
We had about 12 people show up the first time. And, I think that's one of the things that is very common in Savannah, where you have people that I'm not, don't get me wrong. All right. I love the fact that people will support it on Facebook, but a like does not equal value when it comes to actually doing the thing.
Well, here's what I learned. It's not even the like. This is what I've learned from experience. So say you put up an event on Facebook or you invite people, right? I have learned that there is a certain segment of the population. There's say you have an event on Facebook, right? And it'll give you 3 options if you're going to respond to that event or that invitation. Option number 1 is something like
interested, going, and maybe, or something like that.
Or like can't go.
Yeah.
It's like can't go, interested, going. Okay. So a whole bunch of people out there
will put interested.
No, they'll put going.
Oh, okay.
And they're not going.
Oh, yeah.
And they have listen, and they know they can't go. They know they can't be there. But here's why they do it. I think this is what's going on there, because they're not just screwing people. They click going because they feel in their mind that is like a vote of confidence. They feel it's their way of saying,
actually helping or something.
They feel like what they're saying is, hey, if I could go, I would. Going. But what that does is it totally messes with your perception of how well your event is being received.
Yeah.
And then the night of the show or whatever, a third of the people who said they were going to be there on Facebook, I just realized this is what's going on, right? So, for example, my film series, right? About 30 or 40% of the movies that I show as part of my film series, I have gotten in the habit of, I intentionally do not tell people what the movie is. Now, this is kooky. It kind of defies logic, because imagine if I said to you, hey, Adam, I got this awesome movie that I'm showing next Wednesday night at the Bean, and tickets are $8, and it's I really think you'll like it. And you go, oh, really? What is it? And I go, I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah.
And then you say, now what's that again? Well, I'm not going to tell you.
Right.
Well, can you tell me anything about it? Sure. It's a thriller, and it was made in another country, and it's at least 20 years old. That's all I'm going to tell you. Please trust me. Yeah. Come out. I think you'll enjoy it. Most people would be like, whatever, dude, thanks. I'm not going to that. Okay.
Right.
But the reason I started doing this is because over the years I noticed that a lot of times I would take the time and money, to track down some little-known film or spotlight some film nobody was thinking about, right?
Yeah.
Then like a year and a half later, there's a big press release from the Criterion Collection that they've rediscovered this movie, right? And they're going to put it out. So anyway, I would put this effort into it. And I would advertise it. Hey, next Wednesday at the Bean, we're going to show blah, blah, blah. Okay. Then come the night of the show, I come within 10 tickets of breaking even. So in other words, if I'd sold 10 more tickets, would have broken even. Lose money.
Not making any money, just breaking even.
Yeah. And then the next week or something, I'll have people who come up to me and go, "Hey, man, I just want to let you know, thank you so much for like picking that film. That film was awesome. I loved it." And I'll say, "Wait a minute, were you? I didn't. But you weren't at the film. I didn't see you at the film." They go, "Oh no, I couldn't make it. But I read what you wrote about it, and then I went and found it on. I ordered it on Amazon, and I rented it, and it was awesome. Thanks, dude. Now listen, on the one hand, I'm thrilled that I turned them on to a cool movie.
Yeah.
However,
wow.
However, if they had just bought
That's a
the
whole
ticket,
other level letdown.
okay, right now the good part is I turned them on to a good movie. Okay, that's part of the reason that's a main reason I'm doing this. But what I'm really doing is I'm trying to create a sense of community.
It is community. You know, it is when you physically get together and you enjoy an activity together. You're communing together.
And we have had over the years at my film screenings, we have had people who would have never ever met.
In
okay,
person, yeah.
Never met. Different age groups, different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
They may have nothing in common except the fact that they
the
both like really odd movies.
Yeah.
So guess what? Over time, they start seeing each other. Occasionally, they go, "Oh, there's that person at the movie," and maybe at some point they wind up sitting near each other and they wind up talking. And afterwards, maybe they go out and get a beer. And what's happened is over the years, quite wonderful friendships have been made. In some cases, people have become romantically involved and become like life partners. And that's where they met.
I'll tell you, talking about that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, so that's why now I don't tell people sometimes what the movie is.
You let them be surprised.
Well, and I've found that when I do that, not always, but sometimes more people will show up to see a movie that they don't know what it is than if I tell them what it is in advance.
It's like a mystery bag.
It's a mystery bag, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
I am cognizant of the fact that is a luxury. And the only reason that I've been able to engender that kind of goodwill with people is that after doing it for 15 years or whatever, some people, they say, I may not wind up liking the movie, but but I'm pretty sure if he's making it a mystery thing, I know it's going to be high quality, and I'll at least have an interesting experience.
Yeah.
So it means a lot to me that anybody would show up to pay $3 or $4 or $5 or $6 or $8 to have no idea what they're going to see, but that's why I do it. It's to thwart those situations.
I think that is a great way to do it. And one of the things that I noticed with the stuff that I've been doing. Is that when I was trying to do like a big convention, the first year we had like 100 people come out of the community and whatever. Second year, I had a better venue, but it was a bad location. We only had about 30 people show up. Better venue, better hotel, that kind of thing. Bad location. This last year.
Are you talking about the Alamo?
Book.
You talking about the Alamo?
No. Okay. I had it at
I'd like to go to a
Cottonwood
book,
Suites.
I'd like to go to a book convention at the Alamo. Everything's a murder mystery.
Yeah.
But the murder mysteries haven't been written before you get there. It's like it's a choose your own adventure.
It was funny because I was like, wow, we have a great venue, and man, the second year I was so heartbroken. I was like, whatever. So the third year I was like, I don't want to give up on this thing, but it's got to be where people want to be, and it has to be where I could do something that at either no cost or low cost. So the Savannah Coffee Roasters. They've got a little room upstairs called the Morrison Room, and I just talked to them. And same thing with E-Shavers. I talked to them about having a poetry book there, doing a poetry reading. The first time I did with my book. The second time, this is the second time coming up, I actually invited 3 other local community poets to perform, and we're going to just get out there and talk to folks. And and I've been talking to folks and saying, hey, this is what we're doing, and just folks that are really interested in it and they like that kind of thing. And I've had a better response going kind of scaling down and trying to say, hey, Jim, let me talk to you about this thing I'm doing, and you've shown some kind of interest before, you know what I mean, that kind of thing.
Well, it's called playing to the room.
Really?
Well, what I mean is it's always better. It's always better to have if you can do it. Now, a lot of times, logistically, it won't work, okay?
Yeah.
But it's always better to have a packed house that only holds 50 people than to have 200 people show up in a place that holds 1,200 people.
Yeah.
And back when we were doing the tiny team concerts, we there was a situation where we would bring in some performers, and we took a couple big risks and had some large rooms, and we knew we wouldn't sell the rooms out. We knew we wouldn't pack them out. But we thought, based on prior history of the artists and the money and the day of the week and everything, we thought, oh, this looks really good. Like there's a chance we're going to get a bunch of people. And then we didn't for whatever reason, and there's nothing more. I mean,
disappointing.
Well, the artists, they're on a stage and they're looking out into a room. You know what I mean?
It's
and
empty.
And even if every single person there is having the moment of their life and loving it, and even if they go up to the artist afterwards and say, "Oh my God, that was the most incredible," it's just really difficult to see a bunch of empty seats, and
it's deflating. I mean, that's what happened with the second convention, because I put a lot of time and effort into it. A lot better venue. It was great, but we just didn't have the folks show up. So this last year, we had about 50 people show up, but I scaled it way down. I mean, like I had maybe 10 authors total, and they were all local, and it was a lot better, vibe, a lot better. We've got to do our little break.
Sure.
Let me do this. Okay, so everybody, you listen to WRU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul.
This portion of WRUU Savannah Sounding programming is brought to you by listeners in the 2020 Savannah Music Festival, presenting Americana artists Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit, Mandolin Orange, Balsam Range and Third Time Out, Sarah Jarrose and Madison Cunningham, Leo Kotke, Amethyst Kia, Bruce Hornsby and the Noisemakers, and more. Information at savannahmusicfestival.org.
Okay, and we have Sebastian Messer, my son in the house, is going to play a little bit for us. Take it away, Bess. And this band's called Krieger. Thanks, Bass. I love it. He's been playing since he was like 13.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so it's just one of those things I love. I like, the fact that he can play, and then kind of just adds an element to the show, I think.
Well, it does.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So we were talking about packing the house out. So, you're probably a good one to talk with about this, because one of the things I do on the show is I talk with folks about their, overcoming obstacles. And we talk about the process and stuff like that. So I think what you were saying is a really great way for smaller artists, authors and entertainers, whoever, when they're trying to do a venue, because, you're out there and you're competing against, you're like a little drop, you're like just a little pebble in this universe of social media and all this other stuff out there, all the noise out there, right? So going smaller, because you're kind of like doing like a micro level of things.
Sort of, yeah.
But you've got a good group of people that are into it and they're supportive of it.
Or you mean like the Film Society? Is that
both?
Okay,
right. All your stuff. Like,
Sure.
you've got this group of people that they're just kind of like, not necessarily cheerleaders, but they dig what you're doing and they want to do it.
I'm really lucky, very, very lucky and cognizant of the fact that, especially with the Film Society over time, a lot of people live in Savannah only for a few years. They move on. It's a transitory town, right? And some people stick around. So with the Film Society, a lot of times we'll get people who start coming, not every week maybe, but, regularly, once a month, twice a month, maybe something like that. And familiar faces, you start to see them, and it's lovely to see them. but then a lot of times after 2 years or something, they come one day and they go, "Hey, just want to let you know this is my last movie. Like I'm going back to Saskatchewan or whatever." They leave, and so then you've got to start all over fresh again. Like, oh, can I try to attract some more people who are going to be, and then there are some of the people who've been coming for more than a decade or 15 years. But yeah, I'm cognizant of and very appreciative of the fact that over time there are people who they do become sort of cheerleaders. I mean, there's in their own way, and and sometimes they lean in and help out. And I mean, just even with like taking a place like the Sentient Bean, where they've been my partner in this. They're kind of the home base of the Psychotronic Film Society.
They're a great place.
Well, they are. They're wonderful, and they. When I first had the idea to do it this way, they were the first place I approached, and there were two owners at the time. Now there's just one. Well, I think there's just one owner, but I could be wrong. But the two owners at the time, they appreciated the idea, they liked it, and we formed an allegiance, and that has resulted in many.
I believe Melanie Goldie does her poetry, the Open Mouth and Tongue.
Perhaps. I mean, there's a lot of different
Tuesday nights over there.
There's a lot of different people who do different stuff there, and but I mean, they've stood. We've worked together, and it's been a symbiotic relationship ever since. But and people, they pitch in with like, we have to turn the coffee house, we have to kind of turn it into a screening room.
Oh wow!
So we got to like move all the tables, move all the chairs, hang up dark curtains, run the sound, put the projector up, and there are a handful of people who, generally speaking, if they're there, if they come to see a movie. Man, as soon as the movie's over,
they become like your AV techs.
Well, I mean, it's the kindest thing in the world, and I can never thank them enough for it. And sometimes I keep saying thank you, and I'm sure it sounds silly, but I mean, some people show up early and help me set up. Some people stick around for a few minutes and help me break down, and that's invaluable because a lot of times, since I'm the guy presenting the film, when the movie's over, sometimes there'll be people in the audience who want to
ask you
they want to talk to me about stuff.
Yeah.
And then but meanwhile we're just trying to get out of there because the bean is closed or closing. But yeah, so it's a luxury.
Do you show the movies there?
So every Wednesday, unless I'm in jail or something, which has never happened that I'm aware of.
Some alternate dimension?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Gale. But we, at 8 p.m., so 8 p.m. every Wednesday night, usually without fail. Every once in a blue moon, I can't be there. I'm out of town or something, and then I will deputize people and give them the scepter of the golden bat, and they'll be able to sort of take over for me and run the show. So Wednesdays at 8 p.m. And then every once in a while, if the Bean has an open Sunday night, we'll do a special Sunday night screening. And in years past, I would occasionally show films, and I still do, occasionally at other venues. So there was a wonderful place, which is no longer here, sadly, called the Muse Arts Warehouse.
Oh, I love the Muse. Actually, I have a story about the Muse, too.
Sure. Well, go ahead.
My friend Camilla did a show there called Explicit Lips.
Okay.
And it was a spoken word poetry show. And she, how when you went in the Muse, they had like the stage and you had the little seats and whatever up front. Well, she asks me to be an artist. She had these poets and she had a live jazz band.
Okay. And
she asked me to be an artist, said I could create whatever art I wanted of the poets while they were performing, like create it on stage.
Gotcha.
And it was crazy because I ended up creating these Conte crayon paintings. And it was the first time, Jim, that I'd ever done any kind of public performance like that. I'd never really shared any of my art with anybody, but I worked with Camilla and she knew that I liked, doing art and things like that. And so that was the first time I ever did a show. And that led to a lot of other things because I met Corey Brooks, who's a photographer, and he did Spotted with Savannah Morning News. So I got involved with Spotted, and then I started writing with them in August of 2014 because of that. Because you remember Heather.
Sure.
I pestered Heather. I was like, Heather, I used to be on the newspaper staff in high school.
Heather's a former
Heather
editor.
Henley. Yeah, Heather Henley. I loved Heather to death. And I still do. I mean, but as an editor, she was so great. For me, it was a lot of fun. I was like,
she's wonderful to work with.
Yeah, she's totally great. But I kept pestering her. Like, we'd have like these little Spotted parties. And I'd say, hey, I'd like to. She's like, oh yeah, just send me something or whatever. But that going to Muse Arts Warehouse was kind of like a genesis for me to being public with my art and the writing and all this other stuff.
Well, I think
if I hadn't done that one show, who knows?
Yeah, well, I think Muse Arts Warehouse occupies a similar place in the hearts and the, I don't know if I say careers, whatever, but the, a lot of people around here really miss that place, and it's because it was a very open-hearted, inviting, welcoming, receptive place that was run by just some of the,
kindest people,
the sweetest,
in the world.
kindness, most generous people who, all they really cared and still care about is boosterism for the local creative community. And they were all about, and still are, even though Muse is no longer there as a building, but in spirit and whatnot, and in everything they do, they work to push and promote and exalt local artists.
And I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly, but I think it's Jenny.
Jenny,
yeah. I actually didn't meet her until this last year.
And her husband, Mark.
And I met her here because she was a guest on Bill's.
Oh, Bill Cooper's show.
Yeah, Bill's Cooper. And he's actually up next. He's
cool. Yeah, Bill Cooper actually used to come all the time to my Psychotronic films, all the time. And I haven't seen him there in a while. He's very busy. But Bill is always good to talk to after the movies because he's very particular about, there's certain types of movies he really enjoys, and certain types he's like, he's got no use for it. And so it's always... I always would feel like I had done an exceptionally good job if I made Bill happy with the movie choice.
Yeah.
He's one who would show up sometimes on a mystery night.
Bill is, he's a great encourager. He's encouraged me a lot with my poetry. Mm-hmm. And talking about earlier, you said about you have people from different walks of life, different age groups, and things like that. I love the fact that he'll tell you he's like 75, right?
Oh, right, something like that.
He's real happy about telling you that. He's like, I'm 75 years old, and I've been through life, and I love that about him because he doesn't have anything to lose to tell you like he likes something or doesn't like something. And he's not really trying to impress you to say, he's not trying to put on airs.
Right,
for somebody.
I've known Bill, casually for a good long time.
Yeah,
but I did not know him when he was a younger man. But I can only assume that the Bill of today is pretty much exactly like the Bill.
I'm pretty sure he's probably the same guy.
And it would be really funny to get in a time machine and travel back and run into him and have him meet him when he's 23 and have him saying I'm 23 years old. Like
I can see that.
You know what I mean?
I'm 23.
Yeah, I'm 23 years old, and then he would give you a $2 bill. So.
That's what I love about Bill. He's a funny guy.
A crisp $2 bill.
Yeah. It's so funny. But, meeting people, you meet a lot of different people in different circles and especially with creative stuff, because it might not necessarily have to be film or poetry or whatever. There might be, an art show, for example, that's coming up or whatever. And I think what you said earlier about getting people involved in the city and I'm not saying for them to subsidize things. I'm not asking people to open up their pocketbook and say, "Oh, here, just take the money." I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is support local artists, support local creative people, and go out and do things that you like to want.
Well, this is the thing, and I've said this to people in the past, and I don't mind reiterating it because it's just something. I mean, it's how I feel. So. Savannah's a very, 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 like I said before, it's a very different town than it was when I moved here. Because, I've been here a long time, 3 decades. But the thing that I liked most about Savannah when I got here was the thing that actually a lot of people didn't like about it, okay? So a very common complaint that a lot of people have who move to Savannah from somewhere else, okay? A very common complaint that you get is people complain and they say, I don't, the scene here sucks. Or there's nothing going on. It's like
I've heard that a lot.
Okay, they say it, and then and now they could be talking about the music scene or the film scene or the book scene, whatever. But they say whatever scene is, there's nothing going on. What do you mean exactly by that? Well, I'm from such and such, and back in such and such, we had this, we had this.
Yeah.
Okay, now a lot of times, now here's the thing: every city's different. Okay, and a lot of cities, especially bigger cities, when you go there, there's sort of ready-made options, okay? Every night of the week, there's a ready-made... If you like reggae music or whatever, then you probably only have to wait 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, and there's going to be some killer reggae band. If you really like a certain type of thing, okay.
Right.
The deal with Savannah is... Now, it's different now because we've had an influx of tourists, and we've had an influx of wealthy developers who've come in, and they're trying to Charlestonize the city, okay? Which I'm not... down with, but whatever.
Right.
I mean, there's only so much I can do to protest what they call it, protesting the rising tide of conformity, right? So, but here's the thing about Savannah. Savannah's the kind of place where you oftentimes you have to make your own fun. You have to make your own options, okay? So, for example, the only, I don't necessarily want, people may think that, like, the Film Society, right, the Psychotronic thing, or the Knocked Out Loaded thing, right? They may think, oh, well, this guy, he's just driven to, like, he wants to get up on stage and talk, and he wants to blather on and show
Right.
people stuff. The truth is, this is the truth. I would much rather just go show up 10 minutes before a film and pay $8.
And be in the audience.
I would just rather, I'd rather pay $8 to go to somebody else's Psychotronic Film Society, right?
Yeah.
Here's the problem. There wasn't one,
Yeah.
okay? And I would complain. I would say to people like, I just don't understand. We have so many artistic people in this town, and we've got this film school. I just don't understand. It seems like there should be like a steady stream, a regular stream of non-commercial, unusual, adventurous film. And I would just kind of, not really, I didn't really kind of go on and on about it, but I mean, I let people know. I'm like, I can't believe we don't have this.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, somebody said, well, don't you kind of already, one of my friends said, well, they would say, well, that's hard to do, right? That's hard to come up with. And I would say, no, it isn't. You got to do this. And what I would do in complaining about it, I would enumerate the 12 steps, what it would take to start something like that.
Yeah.
And then after a while, some of my friends said, hey, it seems like you already know how to do this. Why don't you just do it instead of waiting for somebody else to do it? And a little bell went off, and I was like, oh, I guess I do know how, I do know how to do it. So I did it, right? And once I did it, some people started to come. And again, it's not some huge thing, but it makes people happy, and there's a loyal following.
It's consistent.
And so
Let me do a station
Sure,
ID real quick. You're listening to WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And my special guest today is Jim Reed. This is the Adam Messer Show. So I agree. It might not be the biggest thing, but it's really cool that you do it and that you continue to do it.
It's for me. It's not about I'm not doing it just to do it, right?
Right.
I'm doing.
You're doing it because it's something that you actually love and you would like to see in the community.
Well, yeah, I'm doing it because nobody else did,
Right.
And because I thought there was a void. So
I felt the same way with the indie authors thing. I really did, because I was like, there are a lot of authors in Savannah, but the ones that get playtime are, bigger names or people that have a big publishing house behind their name or whatever. And you don't get,
which makes sense.
You don't have a lot of venues or even events for any indie authors. So I was like, you know what, let me create something, because there wasn't anything. And the poetry thing, it wasn't even so much that necessarily that there was a need for it, but I wanted to promote poetry in the community. And it was just a natural evolution of, okay, well, I'm writing poetry, but I don't want it to all be about me. Let me invite some other local community poets and give them a platform. I've had them on the radio show, and I'm having them over the thing, but it's the same kind of thing, because it's something I enjoy doing.
Well, yeah, and people should understand that, so back in 2003 when I started the Psychotronic Film Society, we didn't have
Right.
There
was nothing.
Well, yeah, well, it wasn't there was nothing, but there was next to nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so things have changed now. Okay, so now, in other words, back then it would have made no sense for me to write a weekly column about what was going on film-wise, because honestly, I would have been writing about whatever my organization was showing,
Right.
and maybe that's one or other organization. And then maybe about 5 times a year, there might have been a reason to write about something SCAD was doing, okay?
Right.
Well, now, 15 years later, it's very different.
Right.
So now there's the PFS, right? There's the Cinema Savannah organization. There's the Lucas Theater, which was open then, but was not routinely really showing a lot of films, okay?
Right.
So now they're doing their own programming. Trustees Theater, SCAD, they have they show films, but they also have a thing called the SCAD Cinema Circle. And that's something that I'm really proud to be associated with. I don't actually, I don't work for SCAD, right?
Right.
I'm not a professor in any way, shape, or form. But, they have been nice enough to extend an invitation to me. And so I help with the curation and the programming. I have input on that for this series, the SCAD Cinema Circle. And then myself and a couple other professors there, we take turns or work in tandem with each other, and we host the screenings, and we conduct audience Q&As afterwards. And that's a really if nobody is familiar with that, they need to look into the SCAD Cinema Circle, because this takes place at the Trustees Theater. It's a 1942 Art Deco movie theater that has been totally retrofitted. It doesn't look like it's from 1942 anymore, but it's beautifully done. It has the cutting-edge, state-of-the-art visual and audio systems. And it's
That's one of the things I love about SCAD with their historical restorations of these buildings. They've also tech retrofitted everything to be modern tech.
Sure.
And you get the best of both worlds, especially a place like that. I'm sure they've got the high def, screens and things like that.
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful place to see films. And so I encourage people, if you go on Facebook or you simply go to the Trustees Theater website, but look for SCAD Cinema Circle. We do 3 or 4 films a quarter, and they're all selected and chosen by film faculty there, and the person who runs the Trustees Theater, the sort of like I forget her exact title. I think it's like the director of programming, and then myself. And then we show these films in a beautiful state-of-the-art theater, and a lot of times these are classic foreign or sometimes American films that most people, maybe they've never had a chance to see in a theater. They might have seen them on a TV screen. It's a totally different experience.
It's a totally different experience.
But yeah, I guess what I was just to get back to what I was saying is, Savannah's a town where you have to make your own fun. I would much rather just show up and pay money and go see a concert by Monks of Doom, okay? Rather than run around like crazy and set the whole thing up and try to finagle ads and get sponsors and make a bunch of like food to have on their deli tray and all this. But the truth of the matter is, if I didn't do it, like that wasn't going to happen.
That wasn't going to happen.
And so what I want to impart to people out there, anybody listening, if there's something in town that you are looking for that you don't find, some sort of an option, entertainment or cultural, whatever, you don't find it, if you really stop and think about it and think to yourself, do I know enough already, or could I easily learn enough to kind of fumble my way through trying to make that happen?
Yeah.
And if you could, then do. Like, try to do that.
Yeah.
And before you know it, and listen, you may do a bad job of it. I'm sure
everybody's going to start off not,
Yeah.
I mean,
some people might say I still do a bad job of it, but the point is, like, you might be able to start something that makes other people happy, and it enhances the cultural diversity of town.
Right.
And if people took 50% of the time and energy in this town that they spend on complaining and whining about how Savannah is lacking something, if they took 50% of that time, now everybody's not going to be suited to do it, right? Right. But if you took 50% of that time and energy and you put it into creating that, okay, then it's going to happen. Now, here's the other thing: if you recognize in yourself that you're not the person to run something like that, okay, then you need to take 50% of the time and energy that you put into complaining about not being here, and you need to take that 50% of time and energy and put it into looking up every single type of social media or newspaper, whatever, to make sure that you are aware if and when somebody does that and actually does it, make sure that you're looking all the time so you hear about it, and then you show up and you pay the $6 and you help them to break even, and then guess what? Now you've got the thing that you wanted. But so many times people are so locked into this notion that nothing that they're looking for is ever going to happen here, that then when it does happen, they have blinders on and they're not aware. They don't support it.
I've seen that a lot with different things in Savannah. We've got about a minute or so left.
Oh, wow.
Jim. Yeah. So where can people check out your stuff with?
Sure. What I would say is, even if you don't love using Facebook, I've got it all set up so you don't have to be a member of Facebook to look at it. Well, I think maybe to join the private group. So Psychotronic Film Society of Savannah is a private group that anybody can join on Facebook. Just click to join. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at PFSSAV. You can check out Knocked Out Loaded Concerts, knockedoutloadedconcerts.com. I think it's down for maintenance right now, but in the next few days, knockedoutloadedconcerts.com. And then Savannah Confidential Walking Tours is a page on Facebook. You can book it through Airbnb. So if you go to airbnb.com experiences, you might get a kick out of my tour. It's The full description's there. It's for adults only. It's kind of raunchy, and it's uncensored, unvarnished tales of my misspent youth.
And then you also have your column in Connect Savannah every week, right?
Every week, the film scene column is in Connect Savannah, and then again, the SCAD Cinema Circle is always something to check out.
There's a lot of different ways people can kind of check out what you're doing around Savannah, right?
Yeah, and people should feel free to reach out to me if you got suggestions for movies or just want to become a part of what we're doing. I mean, it's just all about making people happy and giving them something to think about.
And last but not least, every Wednesday you do a film showing at Sentient Bean.
Yeah, all you got to do is show up.
The
Sentient Bean Coffee House on Forsyth Park every Wednesday at 8 p.m. There's usually a little introduction.
And they can just show up. They don't have to have tickets in advance.
No, we sell tickets at the door. The tickets range between about $6 all the way up to about $8 or $9.
And you're already at a coffee shop, so you can get something to drink and a snack or whatever.
They have a full award-winning vegetarian menu. They have craft beer and organic wine.
I didn't know they served adult beverages.
They're on special during the movie. Everybody's really quiet. We get the room as dark and quiet as possible, and we show some of the most amazing movies you've never heard of. I mean, coming up this Wednesday, we're showing a rare film from 1970. It's a great movie. It's an action suspense movie called.
Don't give a name away. Remember you said you do.
Oh no, I'll tell you this one.
Oh, you'll tell us this one. Okay. Oh, wow.
It's called Darker Than Amber,
okay.
And we showed it about 10 years ago, and people loved it. This movie has never been released on DVD, Blu-ray, or digital streaming anywhere in the world.
Wow.
And I have a rare copy of it, and it's based on...
Do you have a VHS copy?
No. But it's based on the Travis McGee novels. If anybody's familiar with the old Pulp Fiction private detective novels from the 60s and 70s that were written by a guy named John McDonald, he had a character named Travis McGee, and this is a movie they made. They thought it was going to be a hit. If it had been a hit, they would have made a bunch of movies like a James Bond series. But it wasn't a hit, but it doesn't mean it's not a great movie.
So Darker Than Amber
Than Amber, this Wednesday, 8 p.m., and it stars Rod Taylor, whom a lot of people know from The Birds and from The Time Machine,
okay,
and Inglourious Bastards. And it's a heck of it's a hard-boiled kind of a modern film noir, and it was shot in Florida.
Okay.
So, yeah, if people want to come see a movie, meet me and say hello.
That's cool. I really appreciate you being on the show today, Jim.
It means a lot to me, and I appreciate Sebastian playing the beautiful music.
That's awesome. All right, so everybody, up next, we've got Savannah at Night with Bill Cooper and the gang, and today's show you've had... I've been blessed to have you here today, Jim, so thank you so much, Jim Reed.
Much appreciated.
All right.